welcome. My name is Kathleen Lucas. I'm with Pennsylvanians Against the Death Penalty and Amnesty International. And I'd like to introduce my good friend, Syl Schieber. And Syl is going to talk about his experience, and he's going to introduce us to his wife at some point. And if you have questions, you can use the Q&A function in the Zoom screen, and I will be able to see them, and I will keep track of them and ask Syl later on in the organization, in the program. Okay, take it away, Syl. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kathleen. With me here this evening is my wife of nearly 54 years now, Vicki. We have spent more than half our life together now, mourning and missing our daughter Shannon, who was murdered by a serial rapist in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on May the 7th, 1998. Shannon was the first of our two children. She was born on August the 8th, 1974. Some of you may remember that, at least I remember clearly, as I was driving home early that morning. Shannon was born shortly after midnight. The morning news was that President Richard Nixon was going to announce his resignation later that day. It was a pretty monumental day in many regards. Shannon was a wonderful, wonderful young child, but a bit of a terror as an infant. She was very restless from day one. We took her to the doctor several times. They told us there was no colic, there were no physical problems. Finally, they told us that we probably just had an extremely bright and frustrated child. Her mind was ahead of her body, and that was pretty frustrating for her. She proved that she was a smart youngster. By 18 months, she knew her ABCs. Around the time she turned 2, this was back in the day before children's car seats had to be in the back seats. So she was sitting next to Vicki as they were driving down the road one day, and there was a pickup in front of them. The predecessor to, I believe it was Toyota, was Datsun. And she got all excited and said, "Mommy, Mommy, DATSUN," which was spelled on the back of the truck. "Spells truck, Mommy, spells truck." So here by 2 years old, she was putting together that letters linked to words. By 3, she was reading. She was very adept both in language and in mathematics. She was a bit of a problem student in school because she was always advanced in her class, and they had trouble keeping up with her. She graduated from National Cathedral for the 8th grade, and then we put her in public school in Montgomery County in Maryland because they had more ability grouping in their classes. She went ultimately to Bethesda Chevy Chase High School. In her senior year, she was president of the student body. At that time, I think there were around 2,200 students. Maybe it was not quite that much, but I think it's around 2,200 today. So maybe it was 1,500 at the time she was there. She then decided that she wanted to go to a good college. She was accepted at Dartmouth, at Brown, at Duke, at Notre Dame. Harvard waitlisted her. They called and said if she would take a slot, they'd give it to her. She decided to go to Duke, partly because it was warmer in the wintertime than any of the other campuses she looked at, but also because they had a writing program. Her last year at Duke University, she was co-captain of the equestrian team there. Her college was, as her earlier education, pretty spectacular. She graduated from Duke University in 3 years with a triple major, mathematics, economics, and philosophy. She had a 3.6 average. The fact that she was co-captain of the equestrian team was an indicator that she was more than just an academic nerd. When she graduated from college, she wanted to take a couple of years away from academics, and she spent a year in New York City working for one of the large accounting firms. Didn't care much for what she was doing there, and came back to the Washington, D.C. area and worked for a consulting firm, human resource consulting firm, for a year in Washington, and then decided that she really did want to go on and pursue a graduate degree in the academic world, and enrolled at the Wharton Business School, University of Pennsylvania, in the fall of 1997 on a full ride scholarship, pursuing a PhD in risk and finance. She was toward the end of her first year there. She had two final exams left to take. She was up studying the night of May the 6th, May the 7th. About 2 o'clock in the morning, she decided to run a bath to get some relaxation and maybe a little bit of rest. And there was the assailant who attacked her managed to pry open a sliding glass patio door in her apartment, and he came in and grabbed her, and she during the encounter, she started to resist. She screamed at one juncture for help, and the next door neighbor, it was they were living in a brownstone that had been converted into six small apartments. It was an old building, but there were six apartments. The next door neighbor heard her scream for help, called 911. The police were there in about 6 minutes, but the neighbor and another neighbor that had heard a scuffle could not convince the police that they had heard the scream coming from her apartment. They knocked on her door. They turned to the neighbors and said, "There's nobody answered. There's nobody here." They checked. The doors were closed. He closed the sliding glass door when he went into the apartment, and they left in 5 minutes. The next day, Sean, our son, was passing through town, and he was going to have lunch with Shannon, stop by Wharton to join up with her to go have lunch. She didn't show up. He talked to some of the other students. She was supposed to be there that morning for a study group, and they had called, could not reach her, so they didn't know what was going on. They told Sean that they had been trying to reach her. He called, he could not reach her, so he went over to her apartment, rang the doorbell, looked. Her apartment was on the second floor of this building, but there was a little patio landing with this patio door. And afterwards, they determined that the house was about 3 foot from the next door house, that the assailant had crab walked up between the two houses and managed to grab hold and get onto the balcony there. And in the short short of it is that he went in there and strangled her as the police were knocking on the door. So Sean gets to the apartment the next afternoon, shortly after lunch, 1 o'clock, 1:30. He's trying to get into the apartment building. The exterior doors are locked. You either needed a key or needed somebody in the apartment to let you into the building. He looked up and he saw that her apartment, her patio door at that juncture was open. So he was supposed to meet a friend. He was driving through town. They were going to go on up to Massachusetts to Amherst, the Amherst area, for graduation the next day, or that weekend. It was a Thursday morning. I guess when he got there, it was Thursday afternoon. They were going up to the Amherst area for graduation that weekend. So we went over to the friend's apartment. This was before cell phones. He called back over to Wharton to tell them that her door was open. He couldn't get into the apartment. He called his mother and told her, Vicky, what was going on. Uh, and then he and the friend went back to the apartment. They started ringing doorbells till one of the neighbors came down and opened the door and let him into the building. It was the neighbor actually who had called 911 the night before. They ran up the steps to her door and pushed open, broke into the apartment. She was laying on the bed, face down, naked and dead. So that was the early part of our story. Sean kind of collapsed. He didn't pass out, but he was in shock. The friend that was with him actually called Vicky and told her that we needed to get to Philadelphia. Something had happened, and Vicky was quite persistent that Sam tell her what happened, and she said, "Well, Shannon is dead." And then Vicky called me shortly thereafter. Of course, quite grief-stricken. It's quite a shock to have something like that announced to you totally unexpectedly. And so we met and we drove to Philadelphia from the Washington, D.C. area. Vicky was working in downtown D.C. I was working in Bethesda at the time. So we got to Philadelphia, and very quickly, police announced to us that this was clearly a homicide. Uh, we uh, we had to stick around through that first night and into the next day. We had to go over and ID the body, and there were interviews and things with the police. At the time, initially, they thought maybe it was someone that she had known, and there had been some kind of relationship or something that had gone awry. We were skeptical of that. Usually, she kept us well informed of any relationships, any dating or whatever she was doing, and she had been so focused on her schoolwork that we didn't think that was an issue at the time. Um, so this was she was murdered at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday. Um, Friday, we were tied up in Philly dealing with police matters. We got back to town on Saturday and had a whole variety of things to start worrying about. There were people coming from literally all over the world to the funeral. The word had spread very quickly. We had people from as far away as Seattle, Washington, Boston, Miami, even had people coming in from out of the country. One of her good friends flew in from Hong Kong for the funeral. So we needed to prepare for that. We had to go buy funeral plots. We had to go buy a casket. We had to make an arrangement for funerals, and again, things that most people don't prepare for in advance because they don't expect these kinds of things to happen. That evening, it was a Saturday evening. We went to mass. Typically, we would go to 5 o'clock or 5:30 mass one Saturday evening. And when we got there, our assistant pastor was saying mass that night. He announced at the beginning of mass what had happened and asked the congregation to pray for us. And we then went through the mass as you go through the mass on a pretty standard basis, and things were as normal as they could be until we got, at least for me, until we got to the Lord's Prayer, and as we were saying that out loud, uh, when we got to the phrase, "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us," I lost my voice. And so we finished mass. My one of my brothers and one of my sisters was there with us. We went back home and we had dinner, as much as you can eat and think about those things at the time. Shortly after we finished, our pastor and assistant pastor stopped by to see us, and as we sat there chatting, one of the things that Vicky mentioned was that we were both raised in large Catholic families. We both attended Catholic schools through grade school, through high school. Both of us went to Catholic colleges. That in our understanding of the Christian faith, we needed to be forgiving people. We had not, neither of us had talked about any of this, but it was very clear that both of us were thinking almost immediately of how we would put all this in the context of our Christian upbringing and what it was that was expected of us being raised Christians and having embraced the Christian faith. So the funeral was a magnificent thing. There must have been 1,000 people in attendance. Vicki and I both had kind of wide work-related uh, groups that were close to us, as well as friends. Family had come in from all over the United States. Vicky's family was scattered from the West Coast to the East Coast. Mine was mostly concentrated in the Midwest, but scattered across the Midwest. So it was a very large funeral. We the homicide investigation went on for 4 years. It was quite an experience as well. I'm not going to go into detail on that. If anybody is interested, there are a couple of retired FBI agents who do a podcast now on crime cases that they worked on during their career, and they've devoted the whole year this year to Shannon's case. You can find it at Cold Red Podcast. Do a Google search, and you can find it, and all the details are presented there. There was a major discovery of corruption in the Philadelphia Police Department. As they went through the investigation, the police there were downgrading, not classifying as crimes, reported sexual assaults. The assailant who attacked her had attacked 4 other women within 4 or 5 blocks of her apartment over the prior 10 or 11 months. Uh, and 2 of the cases had been classified as non-crimes. They had not notified the community of what was going on. So anyway, there was all this scandal, and the press got very involved, and they uncovered much of the story. Uh, about I don't know, 2 or 3, maybe 4 months into the homicide investigation, we met with one of the detectives who came to ask us some questions about background and so forth that were potentially pertinent in the investigation. And we told him at that time that we would not support a death penalty prosecution in the case. He advised us that we should not let anyone know about our position. Some months later, the chief prosecutor handling death penalty cases or first degree murder cases in Philadelphia, and several of his colleagues, one of his assistants, a special assistant to the police commissioner, a couple of lawyers from the solicitor's office came to see us and tried to talk us out of our position, or advise us that if we became public about it, it could complicate both the homicide investigation and ultimately a prosecution. That we really needed to change our mind, or at least keep this under our hat. The There was one more attack after Shannon, about a year after Shannon, in August, a little over a year. In August of 1999, there was another attack in Philadelphia, and then the assailant seemed to disappear, went into a black hole. In 2001, there were a series of sexual assaults began to occur out in Fort Collins, Colorado. Fort Collins is where Colorado State University is located. In Philadelphia, he was attacking college or graduate student women, with one exception. One of the victims had graduated from Temple a year before he broke in on her. She was working in the city, so she fit the profile of the other victims. Out in Colorado, he started with a similar pattern. In that summer of 2001, he attacked 6 women out there. By the third, they were clearly aware that they were dealing with a serial assailant, and they put out an all points bulletin across law departments, police departments all across the country, asking for any information about similar patterns. Someone in Philadelphia picked this up. They sent DNA from Shannon's case out to Fort Collins, and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation tested the DNA against the cases out there, and they made a link in the fall of 2001. Fort Collins had a small police department. They had a fantastic, high-profile murder case occurred in the fall of 2001, and pulled some of the detectives that had been working the sexual assault case off. So they did not get back on his track until the spring of 2002, and they finally captured the guy, and he was arraigned for the attacks out there on the morning of April the 23rd, 2002. It turned out there were eight attacks. There were 2 more women that he attempted. I don't think he was successful in the spring of 2002. When they brought him in for questioning and determined his background, at the time he was married. He was in the Air Force. He was a missile technician. He had a top secret clearance. So he had a kind of Jekyll and Hyde characteristic about him. Once they caught him, the big news in Philadelphia was that we were opposed to the death penalty in the case. Of all the attacks, 6 in Philadelphia, 14 either assaults or attempted assaults in Colorado. Uh, of all 14 of the attacks, there was only one murder. Shannon's was the only case that was that could result in a death penalty prosecution. So the headline in the Daily News the morning the morning after they caught him was that the Schiebers are not seeking vengeance. They're opposed to the death penalty in the case. The next morning, the Philadelphia Inquirer quoted Vicky saying that we needed to be forgiving people, but it also quoted the district attorney in Philadelphia saying that it didn't matter what the Schiebers' position was on the death penalty. That was the appropriate penalty uh, for the murder of Shannon, and that's what they were going to pursue. So anyway, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, there was kind of a public kerfuffle, I guess you would call it. Much of it covered in the press about our disparate views on these things. The attorney representing the fellow out in Colorado made clear very early that he was willing to plead guilty to all of the assaults in Colorado, all the assaults in Philadelphia, including Shannon's murder, if he did not face a death penalty. So from the perspective of Fort Collins, if the death penalty was not on the table, he would plead guilty, and it would really simplify their handling of the case. And in Philadelphia, it would also simplify the handling of the case, because if he pled guilty, they wouldn't have to go to trial. After we, Michael Smerconish was a editorial writer at the time, and he also had a radio talk show, I believe, in Philadelphia. He wrote an op-ed in the Philadelphia Daily News, an open letter saying that a letter to actually was addressed to Vicky, but it was to both of us, saying we didn't have a right to oppose the death penalty. The Daily News was very generous and allowed us uh, pen a very substantial response why we were opposed to the death penalty. Our basic point was that it was in opposition to our faith. We were raised to believe that life is sacred, and we ought not be killing each other. But there were also discriminatory aspects of its application. There were geographic discrepancy in how it was applied. And in fact, Philadelphia is a shining example of the sort of discrepancies that go on around the country. The DA at the time was Lynn Abraham. She served as the district attorney for just shy of 25 years as in Philadelphia. And during her tenure, slightly more than 51% of all the death penalties handed down all across Pennsylvania came from her jurisdiction. So the jurisdiction represented 11 or 12% of Pennsylvania's population over this period, but they represented 51% of the death penalties, death sentences. So we made these arguments in the Daily News, and the next thing we knew was they were negotiating a plea deal with the assailant out in Colorado. Philadelphia police went out there. I got to know the public defender who represented the assailant during the criminal proceedings in Philadelphia. He told me afterwards that the DA very definitely intended to pursue the death penalty once he was arrested, but with the barrier that we put up, there was no way she could get around it, and for that reason, they did negotiate a plea deal. he agreed to plead guilty for Shannon's murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole for that crime. And he got an additional 60 to 120 years for the other assaults in Philadelphia, with those sentences to be carried out consecutively. He was sentenced for Shannon's murder on the 30th day of May in 2002. That afternoon, after the sentencing, the DA went out and held a press conference and said that it they were glad that this was over, but it didn't make any difference what our intentions were or what our wishes were. The appropriate sentence in this case should have been the death penalty, and that's what they intended to pursue. But with the plea deal, they were willing to move on. Uh, the interesting aspect of this, if you look at it in retrospect, he was arrested on the 23rd day of May, on the 23rd day of April. He was sentenced for Shannon's murder on the 30th day of May. In 37 days, we were finished with all of the criminal proceedings in the case. Had he been tried for murder with the intent to pursue a death penalty sentence, and had they won that, there would have been another trial. There would have been hearing after hearing after hearing on whether all of this was carried out appropriately, and the death sentence should be carried out. He would still be sitting on death row in Pennsylvania today, and we would probably still be going to hearings. Instead, in 37 days, we could close the book on that aspect of this case, and we could try and put together a reasonable life and a reasonable pursuit of trying to accomplish something positive in the memory of Shannon, rather than going through time and again all of the gory details of the crime and all of the machinations of the courts and the legal proceedings between the state and the assailant. The excuse me. There was a considerable amount of public skepticism after we finished. We were out in Colorado. Excuse me. In Colorado after the sentencing out there, which was about a month after the sentencing in Philadelphia, and a man in one of the press reporters started pushing me on how we could have opposed the death penalty. And I tried to explain our faith background and what have you, and he wouldn't have it, and he wouldn't have it, and everything I offered, he pushed back on. And finally, I looked at him and I said, "Look, if you can't stand by your principles when it's difficult, they're not your principles." And that's kind of become our standard response as people challenge us. Over the years since then, between the two of us, we've worked in 22 or 23 different states trying to pursue the end of the death penalty. We've been successful in some cases, especially here in Maryland, where we have lived since shortly after we were married, where our children were born and raised. We've had a number of successes. We've had some painful failures. We spent a lot of time out in Kansas and Nebraska. Sam Brownback was a governor at the time. He had been a senator. Vicky had testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee when he was a member there. He was so taken with her telling of the story, took a video of it home for his children to watch and discuss. Um, we met in his office several times as governor of Kansas, but we could never get him to take on the leading proponent for keeping the death penalty in the Senate Judiciary Committee there. We spent a lot of time in Nebraska and talked to many legislators. We were all over the state dealing with the public and legislators. The legislature there ultimately voted to end the death penalty, and the governor at the time, Pete Ricketts, vetoed the bill. The legislature overrode his veto, but he and his dad put up $400,000 to get a plebiscite on the ballot in the state, and the voters overrode the legislature's uh, ending of the death penalty there. So the death penalty was reinstated. One of the painful aspects of both of these cases were that both of these were Catholic governors, and should have been maybe a little more sympathetic to the issues we were trying to raise. When we look around what's going on elsewhere in the United States today, the actual application of the death penalty tends to be very concentrated in a small handful of states: Texas, Missouri, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama. Two of the states at the head of the list, Texas and Florida, have Catholic governors today. There's a lot of work we need to do as Christians in terms of convincing people what the principles are here that we think are very important. And we think they're not only important because it's what we believe, we think they're also important because they're a tremendous benefit to the people who follow the path that we have followed. We've come across in our wanderings quite a number of people on the other side, and we've gotten to talk to a number of them who are 15, 20, 25, 30 years down the path waiting to have somebody else killed because of what they did to a member of their family, one of their loved ones. And I did not realize till we got into this business what wrath being a deadly sin really meant. Um, there's a saying attributed to Mark Twain. A lot of things attributed to Mark Twain that Mark Twain probably didn't say, but he's attributed as saying, "Hatred is an acid that does more damage to the vessel in which it is stored than to on anyone onto whom it is poured." Uh, Living with this welled up hatred and anger for so many years is extremely damaging to the health, to the well-being, to the relations that members of these families suffer. Uh, they die from it prematurely. They end up in divorces. They end up with um, all kinds of maladies that are not good for the human being. So anyway, that's kind of the general nature of our story. I think Kathleen may have some questions, or maybe some members of the listening audience have some questions. I would prefer to answer or talk about what you're interested in rather than telling old tales here. So, Kathleen,
Thank
you're
you, Syl. We actually have some questions both from audience members and from folks who had sent them in ahead of time. And I have a couple of greetings from several people that I think that you know
oh,
who are just saying they admire your strength. One of them is in Philadelphia. He's the chief of the homicide unit at the Defender Association of Philly. And he says, I represented the man who killed Shannon. The Schiebers are wonderful people who live their faith.
he's a good man also.
Yeah.
Well, I've gotten to know him fairly well. He's a wonderful man.
You spent years in working to end the death penalty. What is it that drives you to do that?
You know, uh, so it's not too long ago. It's been a year or two now, but we were a quarter of a century on in this journey. I was having a discussion with our. I guess we were together. We were having a discussion with our pastors and people in the parish, um, and our pastor pointed to the Holy Spirit as having bestowed on us a wonderful gift, and I had never ever thought about it in that context. But the Holy Spirit, uh, if you think about Pentecost, it's about giving voice to people who maybe had in their heart right sentiments, but maybe didn't have quite the either cachet or the courage to go out and stand on the stump. And uh, we have a unique view of how the underbelly of this system looks. And our view was that it's not at all pleasant, and it's not something that most of us, if we view it clearly, uh, would want to embrace. And we ought not waste that voice. We ought not waste that experience because people stumble into these situations totally unexpectedly, totally unprepared. There's not a prep course for any of this. You know, you think about these three families of these officers that were shot there yesterday, what they're going through, the idea that you've got, you know, in our case, a 23-year-old child who had done everything right. She was this amazing person, not just academically. You know, when they held a memorial for her in Wharton in the fall after she died, that everybody was dispensed, they were dispersing because the school year was over when she died. In the memorial, uh, one of the attendees was a nun from West Philadelphia Catholic High School. Shannon had gone over there in the fall of '97 when she got to Philadelphia, and she said she asked the teacher, you know, can I organize a basically what you'd call a economic education program, financial literacy program for these inner city minority kids. So she went over there twice a week through the school year, no pay. Nobody asked her to do it. She went over there. The night she was killed, they were holding a reception for her. They were disappointed she didn't show up. They couldn't understand after she'd spent all this time and she talking about stocks, about bonds, about how to do a budget. She helped set up this little company for a school project the second semester, and they had to keep the books and do a budget and all this stuff. They couldn't understand why she didn't show up. She didn't show up because she was dead. You know, we didn't know anything about this. You know, one of her classmates, a couple of weeks before she died, they were going to meet on Sunday morning and go to mass together. She shows up with this 80-some-year-old guy with her. The afternoon before, she ran across him in the street in her neighborhood. He was struggling with his groceries. She helped him get his groceries in, and his wife had recently died, and he was having a hard time. She took him to church, and they were going to take him to breakfast. You know, she just had this giving heart, and so you know we you can't. She she was such a model person, a citizen, Christian, that and when you're given voice, you you need to spread you need to spread what you've seen and what you've learned. If we didn't owe it to anybody else, we owed it to her.
Mm.
And so that's why we've done it, because it's the right thing to do. And you know, I had never thought about it, but you know, somebody gave us voice, and maybe it was the Holy Spirit. But at least we've used it.
Thank you. Thank you. I understand that you met with then Governor Tom Wolf back in 2015. Can you talk about how that came about and what that experience was like?
Um, we got a call asking if we'd be willing to come to a off the record meeting at the governor's office. And we got there, I don't know, there were several members of the staff, you know, the Department of Corrections folk, and I think maybe the Attorney General was there, the governor was there. Uh, there were probably about 20 of us who were survivors who had lost a loved one to murder. There were three of us who were on our side of the issue, and all the others were on the other side of the issue. And they, you know, the governor wanted to talk about what our experiences were and why we were doing what we were doing and what our how it affected us and so forth. And the people on the other side, you know, every one of them was 15, it was 20, it was 30 years. And they talked about the pain and the aggravation and going back time and time again to these hearings and having to go through the bloody, you know, these are not these are not pleasant experiences. So anyway, we explained our story, and our story was a little shorter than my long-winded diatribe tonight, but it was essentially the story. Um, so we get all done. The kind of the most amazing aspect of it, there was a small handful of us sat around afterwards, and we're just kind of chatting about our own experience. There was no tension between the pros and the cons. Um, which maybe is a good metaphor for what we ought to be thinking about on a broader context today. That if we sit down and talk to each other, even though we're on the opposite side of things, we'd find out that we got a lot of common interest. But anyway, we were talking about our respective experiences. As we were finishing up, one of the guys looked at me and he says, "Boy, I wish I was where you are." Uh, you know, uh, one of our friends that we met over the years was Bud Welsh, whose daughter Julie was killed in the Oklahoma City bombing. And Bud talked about his own anger and what it was doing to him in the first year after Julie was killed. You know, he wanted to kill the guy himself. And he was drinking and he was smoking and he was lost his business and he was losing his marriage. And Julie came to him one night in a dream and said, "Daddy, he killed me. Why are you letting him kill you?" And Bud Welsh was the guy. If you were paying attention, there was one of the survivors, someone who had lost somebody in that bombing, went up to upstate New York and knocked on Timothy McVeigh's dad's door and went in and sat down and talked to him. That was Bud Welsh. Bud said immediately after the bombing, there was maybe 2% of the people were opposed to the death penalty. By the time they got to the execution, he said maybe half were. He said 10 years afterwards, 98% of the people were opposed to, wished they had not done it. It takes a horrible, horrible toll on those people that go through this. And we need to understand that. It's a it's a trap. Excuse me.
So I have two questions that are really together. One is, what are the chances of abolishing the death penalty in Pennsylvania now? And the other side of that is, how is it going in the state house?
Those are questions for For you, you're the boots on the ground. You know, in many a case, when we start, the legislators just look at us and say, there is no way I can do that. But then when the, there's entryways, there's a variety of entryways to bring this to their attention where they come to understand it's not serving it's not serving the common good of the people in the state that they represent. And it's not even serving the interests of the immediate victims uh, who uh, who are survivors of these horrible cases. In some cases, the religious argument is extremely important. I think you've seen people that we've talked to that have been moved because, you know, maybe since I was a little kid, always thought the Sermon on the Mount was kind of the North Star of what being a Christian was all about. And that's probably why I got tripped up on the Lord's Prayer. Because in Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount's laid out in three chapters, 5, 6, and 7. In chapter 6, he gives us the Lord's Prayer. And then there's uh, two more phrases after the presentation of the Lord's Prayer. The first one is, if you forgive the others' trespasses, then the Heavenly Father will forgive your trespasses. The next one, the next verse is a little more challenging. If you do not forgive others' trespasses, the Father will not forgive yours. You know, there's a bit, and in the immediate instant, that looks like a burden that is way too high. But if you step back and you think about it, it's an unbelievable gift for the people that will grab hold of it. Think about the 37 days compared to where we would be if we had gone the other way. 37 days versus 27 years and counting. He would still be sitting there in Pennsylvania, and we would still be in some kind of a contentious relationship. And we're not, and we haven't been for the last 20, however many years, 24 years or whatever it is now. So
That brings me to another question, which is, have you ever met the person personally? And have you had any communication with him at all?
we have not met, but we've had a written communication. Uh, Vicki was co-teaching some courses at Mount St. Mary's University a number of years ago, and got into the restorative justice uh, part of this whole story, and wanted to reach out, and so inquired to the Department of Corrections. He's serving his sentence in Colorado. Uh, he's serving a lot of years out there also. So he's under 2 life sentences and I don't know, probably 300 additional years. Uh, and the Department of Corrections out there had started a restorative justice program, but they were not willing to let us come meet. They were not, because of the nature of the crime, and they were just concerned that it might result in problems, which I found somewhat ironic that law enforcement was very concerned about protecting us now, while they were letting him run loose in Philadelphia. But anyway, that's an ironic twist. Um, the the he profusely apologized for what he did and the pain he caused and so forth. Uh, we we in the response Vicky wrote him first and said, we were not vengeful people. We um, did not wish him harm. We did believe in Christian principles, and forgiveness is a central part of that. Um, we asked him some details about the event. Uh, part of the part of the messy deal in Philadelphia was they used the death penalty as a lever to coerce a false confession, uh, which the death penalty has been found to be used frequently to coerce false confessions. The false confession was not to force him to plead guilty to something he didn't do. It was to get him to give them confession that would support them in civil proceedings that we brought against the city related to Shannon's murder. Uh, the If you go listen to this podcast, the details of all this are spelled out there. I don't want to go into it here. It's a a much longer and more detailed story than what we can talk about tonight.
And we have a question from up north. How can Canadians help?
Well, pray for us.
Right.
Pray for us a lot. Uh, to the extent they've got friends in the United States that may be on the other side of the issue, they can talk to them. Um, the, they can support groups like yours that are trying to move us to the other side. It's a very small number of countries left in the developed economies of the world that are still engaged in this. United States and Japan, I think, is about the length of the list. I mean, the notorious list that are into this is China and Saudi Arabia and Russia, and um, we're not in very good company in terms of this practice. Um, and again, I don't think it serves the interest of the people that supposedly it's serving. When you look at the pattern of these penalties, they're highly concentrated in a very small number of jurisdictions. I think, I don't know, 55, 60% of the death sentences come from about 2% of the jurisdictions around the country. If you There was a study done by the Death Penalty Policy Institute a number of years ago. Um, if you committed a murder in Houston, you were 10 times more likely to face a death penalty prosecution than under similar circumstances in Dallas. In Kansas City, or in St. Louis, you were 10 times more likely to face a death penalty prosecution than in Kansas City. The Philadelphia stood out in Pennsylvania. Ironically, in many of these cases, when these DAs that pursue the death penalty all the time leave office, all of a sudden the number of death penalty prosecutions drops precipitously, and it's not because crimes or prosecutions drop. It's because the prosecutors, uh, bloodthirsty prosecutors, are no longer there trying to serve up death penalties.
How do you feel about life sentences?
You know, I I think there may be instances where where they are probably more extensive than needed or called for. In our case, we have been told repeatedly, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but we've heard it from people in in the police department, in the FBI, other psychologists that these sexual predators uh, tend to be unreformed, and I would certainly hate to ever turn this guy loose um, back in the community. If you listen to this podcast that I mentioned, there have been four different other victims, other women who were attacked by this guy, have talked about their experiences. Um, that I would never ever want I would never ever want this this guy to be allowed to do something like this again. He was very vicious. Um, one of them in Philadelphia was very close to being a case like Shannon. She was strangled into unconsciousness. She was in the hospital 2 days because of the extent of her injuries. He may have thought that he had actually killed her because he took her into the bathtub and ran water and completely bathed her and put her back in her bed. She came to later. Um, you know, he was putting belts around their necks and pulling them tight, and it's if you scream, I'm going to kill you. Um, and to the sexual assault itself was horrendous. It's a tough situation, and I think in some cases it's probably definitely overly harsh, but there are cases where I think it's probably appropriate. And, I'm not qualified to sort out exactly how you go through and sort all that out. But it is at least a, a first better, worst alternative to killing them.
Sure. We're about to wrap up, so if the audience has any other questions, now would be a good time to put them in the Q&A. And in the meantime, um, one of the things you talked about is the activity around specific geographic areas. And one of the things that's been interesting that the Death Penalty Policy Project has shown is that while district attorneys are still seeking the death penalty, and we're seeing executions being carried out, juries are not returning death sentences. And do you have thoughts about that?
Uh, you, it, most people think about this in the abstract.
Mm-hmm.
I, a month after Shannon was killed, the guy down in Texas uh, was three guys chained this black fellow behind a pickup and drug him down the road. I mean, you hear in these horrendous stories, and it kind of goes past you, and you think about anybody that could do something like that is a vicious animal who doesn't deserve to live. Sister Helen likes to say, well, maybe he doesn't deserve to live, but do we deserve to kill him? Uh, you know, and so then you don't pay any attention, and all of a sudden they're at trial, and you hear that they've been sentenced to death, and you say, yeah, they're finally getting what they deserve, and you go on, and there's never a touch. You never look them in the eye. You never there's no human contact there with you. It's just all in the abstract. When a jury sits there with the person in the box, and you know, there often are extenuating circumstances about these people's background, how they were raised, whether they were, God knows what, things that most of us can't conceive of. But to actually put your finger, your hand up and say, I vote for that person to be put to death. That now it's no longer so abstract. And I think people are are reluctant to take that, put that hand up because they don't want that on their conscience.
True.
You know,
We have a, I'm sorry, go ahead.
taking another person's life has to be an awfully daunting thing when it's no longer abstract, but it's part of your reality. And thank the Lord that for most of us it is so daunting that we don't want anything to do with it.
I have a greetings here from a Notre Dame mom, and she says, "Thank you very much." And Shannon is in God's eternal loving embrace, and you are in their prayers.
Well, thank you. Vicky and I got married at Notre Dame. Go Irish. We wish their football team was a little better this year than they've been so far. Hope springs eternal. And God bless Dan Stevenson.
Okay, there you go. And then, what do you think about reparations for people who were found to be innocent after they were convicted and did prison time?
Uh, I, I think we owe them big time. And financial reparations and counseling, uh, absolutely. You know, the miscarriage of justice uh, takes a horrible toll on people, and we've met a number of those people too. It disrupts their lives as much as our lives are disrupted, and some of them never get over it. So absolutely, when we steal 10, 20, 30 years of somebody's freedom, their ability to have a family, their ability to build relationships, to build a posterity, it's a horrendous theft. And it God, God knows that in some cases it's an honest mistake. In many cases it is not. And especially in cases where it's not, there needs to be some kind of reparational justice. But even where it is an accident, we need to acknowledge there's been an accident, and we're going to help make up for it. You don't walk away from your accidents.
There are several opportunities for people to take action. The easiest way to do that is probably to go to our website, which is www.padp.org. You'll also be receiving a follow-up email after the session with a direct link so that you can take action. Did you get to introduce Vicky yet?
Oh, yes, we did at the beginning.
Oh, sorry, I was busy writing things down.
She's still here.
Okay, good. It's lovely to see you. Okay, well, thank you both so much. Anything we should know before you want to let us go?
Not, not that I know of. I paid my taxes yesterday, so I'm in good shape.
Good man. Good man. Good man. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having us, and if we can help, let us know.
Thank you. Good night.
Big gift to us. Thank you so much.